Story 1. A few years ago, I was working for a local health department, and part of my duties included the weekly monitoring of water quality at public beaches for E. coli levels. It was a straightforward process. I'd visit the lakes, collect multiple samples in 100 milliliters bottles, and then take the samples to a nearby lab that the county had a contract with for analysis. Well, it would have been straightforward if it wasn't for Chumley. He earned the nickname because of his striking resemblance to the character from the Tennessee Tuxedo cartoons, although I guess a comparison to the Pawn Star version wouldn't be entirely inaccurate. Chumley was the lab tech who took delivery of the samples and then ran the tests. Simply put, the guy was a jerk. He was doing entry-level lab work, but had the demeanor of someone who was deciding where to put the Nobel Prize for chemistry that was inevitably coming his way. He also viewed all incoming clients as interruptions, and looked at us as if we should bow with gratitude that he would take time away from his vital work to deign to speak with such lowly peons. The first half of that summer, other staff had been monitoring the lakes, and it wasn't until the beginning of July that there was a shuffling of duties and I took over. Soon after I began getting the test results, I got the feeling that something wasn't right. The test reported the amount of E. coli present as a given number of colony-forming unit CFUs. Anything over 300 CFUs, and we would issue an advisory. On a good week, the typical range for these lakes was something along the lines of 3,100 CFUs, but the numbers I was seeing now were in the low teens, or even single digits. Given the number of geese, and by extension, geese droppings, that I routinely saw, those numbers were just a little bit too good to be true. Adding to my suspicion was the dramatic change in test results the previous summer when the contract for testing passed from one lab to the one that Chumley worked at. In the years prior to the switch, there would be about 40-50 individual samples that came back as high for the summer. The year that the switch occurred, the number dropped to 5. The year that I took over up to that point, 0. So now I'm more than a little suspicious. The next time I dropped off samples, I asked Chumley if there might be a problem with the test, as those numbers just didn't seem plausible. Keep in mind, I didn't accuse him personally of incompetence, as I acknowledged that it very well could have been a problem with the test itself. The response I got was the jerk lovechild of indignation and condescension. Apparently, the problem was that I didn't understand the real science behind what he was doing, and I should just leave things to the professionals. Okay. Up to this point, I was just trying to get to the bottom of the suspicious results. The results that may have been telling little kids it was safe to go swimming in disgusting pools. Now I was genuinely mad, so I went to my boss with my concerns and suggested a simple test. The next time I collected samples, I would collect one extra. I would intentionally spike this sample with some of the readily available goose droppings. While I wouldn't be able to determine just how much E. coli I was adding, if the testing was accurate, the spiked sample should at least be significantly higher than the others taken from the same location. My boss agreed and I collected my samples. The results that came back on my special sample: 0. Not none detected, but 0. Anyone who has done any quantitative work would know that is a huge no-no. Now I might not be as scientifically savvy as Chumley, but I'm pretty sure that this was evidence that something was wrong. I gave the results, along with the photos I took of the process, to my boss, who promptly had a meeting with the owner of the lab. Shortly after that, the lab lost the contract for all the work that was being done for the county, although it was called a non-renewal. While we are not talking about a loss of revenue significant enough to drive them into bankruptcy, it certainly made a sizable dent in the bottom line. What was the final fate of Chumley? I can't think that an employee who blatantly disregarded valid concerns and cost his company thousands of dollars would have a bright future. Screw you, Chumley. All you had to do was not be a jerk. Story 2. A few years ago, I was going through a harder point in my life. I was living with my brother and my mom, and that was it. My brother, albeit a bit younger, could barely keep his grades up or clean his room, let alone help out with the house, so most choices and responsibilities ended up falling upon my mother and I to work out. And at the time of the story, We ended up agreeing that the current city we lived in was too expensive and crappy because I didn't like my peers in the school district. And in less than 10 minutes, we had agreed to move nearly half an hour away and never look back. And it was perfect. Well, it was perfect for about a week, if that, because the moment we moved in, our douchebag of a neighbor existed. Enter Roger, who made the mistake of taking my mom's parking spot. This was an issue, because if we didn't have our parking spot, we had to park 5 minutes of walking away from the house, which was unpleasant for us. So we decided to politely ask for our spot back. "Hi, is this your car?" my mom asked, as she saw Roger walk back to his car. Roger: "Yeah, and it's my spot, too. It's always been that way." "Well, you see, the spots are numbered, and this is clearly our spot. Screw you." And with that, Roger had driven away and set the tone for the entire lease between us. My mom and I agreed we'd try to do what we could to get the neighbor to reconcile in his ways and keep notes of anything, well, noteworthy, but otherwise, not much could be done. The landlords did nothing to help us, so we were out of that spot. About a month in, I left school about an hour early and found a free parking spot when I drove there with a friend, and decided this would be the day we gave him a taste of his own medicine. Turns out, he wasn't very rational either. This led to him blocking my friend in so he could threaten to assault him until my friend insisted on leaving. I told my mom about this, and she agreed that this was the last straw. We were taking this guy down, so she told me to wait and do nothing for a day, so she could get in touch with her friend, who happened to be a sheriff for our local county. Now, I do want to defend myself a bit here. Nah, just kidding, we're totally snitches, especially when it comes to people like this. Anything that comes their way, they deserve. So we told this guy everything small that happened since the month we moved in. They were constantly loud. We heard yelling from Roger all the time. At one point they broke some furniture outside, and my mom could smell stuff through the walls. This turned out to be drugs. The sheriff seemed intrigued. Sheriff: "Now, Mom, how much do you hate this guy?" Mom: "I just want my parking spot." Sheriff: "Well, here's the thing. We can't do anything about your parking spot. That's a civil dispute, and not our territory." "But..." Mom: "But..." Sheriff: "You mentioned you smell stuff through the walls, right? Well, we've been arresting an awful lot of people driving under the influence, and it's really close to this complex. If we got him for that, he'd have no car to park in your spot behind bars." And so our plan was born. We wrote down everything we smelled. We wrote down the plates of every car that was in our and his spot. We even set a camera up to automatically take pictures of cars and log when they left, and pulled an motion camera I set up on a high window with a Raspberry Pi, and basically every noise we heard. And when the time came and the sheriff needed evidence, we forwarded it all onto the police officer. Fast forward through months of this. Half of our apartment is packed up. I've resigned to always walking home and not even bothering having my mom drive me most days, and our neighbor is still being obnoxious as heck. And then I saw a truly beautiful sight. The apartment right next to us, swarmed by 6 law enforcement cars, 2 of which were for CPS, and 4 of which were, well, armed cops. Turns out, almost every single plate we noted down and sent to the friend had been arrested for some form of drug possession. He wasn't just buying drugs, he was selling drugs. Basically every kind of them. We know he had some form of cocaine, meth, and weed in his house, and there was probably more we weren't told of. And that CPS car? Turns out, he had shared custody of 3 kids. He definitely won't be seeing those kids again, the sheriff told us. He also told us later that Roger got years behind bars, though I'm not sure how many. Probably something over 10. The funny part is that nobody except the sheriff knew my mom was behind this. She said she wanted to remain anonymous, and even turned him down on taking us to dinner. When he asked her why, she replied, "Well, it was a bit late, but you got us that parking spot back, didn't you?" Story 3. Background: my wife and I live in this quiet neighborhood with our little girl. We're not rich by any means, but we're happy with what we got, you know? We own this not-so-fancy car, but man, I love that thing. It's been with us through thick and thin. Now, onto the craziness that's been happening lately. When we first moved into this building, we met our neighbor, let's call her Karen. She's got 2 parking spots in this joint, one for her Toyota Corolla and the other for some vintage VW Beetle she brought in just to reserve her precious parking spot. Yeah, she's one of those. Karen, right off the bat, told me not to park my car in her spots. I said, sure, no problem, because I'm a chill guy. But, you see, life happens. One night, I was dead tired from work and wasn't paying attention when I parked in Karen's Toyota spot. She wasn't around when I did it, but the next morning, I found my car with a key-scratched blue paint job. I didn't see Karen do it, but when I looked up, there she was, staring at me like she was sending some kind of twisted message. That was just the start of Karen's craziness. My neighbor had a run-in with her too. He parked in her spot once, and she retaliated by backing her old rusty Beetle into his car and scratching it all up. I had that whole incident caught on camera, which I'll get to in a bit. That incident with my neighbor was the tipping point for me. I decided to set up a camera to catch Karen in her act. I mean, nobody likes a vandal, right? So I mounted this security camera outside my window, and boy, did it pay off. But the day that made me want to pull my hair out was when my wife called, saying our daughter was sick and needed to go to the hospital. I was racing home and just parked wherever I could to pick them up. And that's when Karen went full on Looney Tunes. She threw a rock the size of a tangerine at my car's back window from her balcony, and then casually strolled back inside her apartment like she just watered her plants or something. I couldn't believe my eyes. Now, picture this. It's the dead of winter, and I'm standing there, staring at my car with a gaping hole where the window used to be. My little girl is sick, and I can't even take my family to the hospital. So, I did what anyone in their right mind would do. I went to the hospital first and dealt with Karen's insanity later. Once we got back from the hospital, I headed straight to the police station to file a report. I wasn't alone in this. A couple of my neighbors had also had enough of Karen's antics and joined me. When the police showed up at Karen's door, she must have sensed the gig was up because she made a run for it. It's been 2 days now, and Karen has completely vanished off the radar. Man, this whole situation has me all kinds of fired up. I mean, I try to be a laid-back guy, but enough is enough, right? Who goes around destroying other people's property over parking spots? It's insane. Anyway, I'm sharing this story with you all because it's been a wild ride living next to Karen. I'll keep you posted if there are any updates on her disappearance. And hey, let this be a lesson to all of us: don't mess with someone's car, especially when it's freezing outside. Stay safe out there, my fellow Redditors. Story 4. Well, this happened about 3 weeks ago. For context, my motorcycle is a Bashan BSR. For those who don't know, it's a Chinese dual sport motorcycle. I start Monday morning off blurry-eyed and half-conscious to go to work. I left my bike on the front porch because I never expected anyone to steal it. Anyways, I trudge through Monday and get home at about 5 p.m. As I pull up, I notice something odd. My porch seems awfully barren for some reason, and it hits me like a truck. My wife greets me at the door, and I asked her, "Honey, where is my bike?" As the color drains from her face, she says, "Oh, please no." Not wanting to believe it, I check my shed thinking, I just forgot I put it back there. Ta-da, no bike there either. I immediately called the fuzz to file a report. Our chief rolls up and gets my info, pics of the bike, VIN, etc. At the time I had a security camera system, but hadn't installed it yet. After he leaves, I feel defeated and go and sit in my house and stew on it for a few minutes. I have a neighbor across the way from me that has a bike on his porch too. Not wanting him to go through the same thing as me, I casually walk over and lay down what happened. As we talk, he points to a camera in the corner of his carport that points at my house. He says, "Give me a bit, and I'll hunt down the footage of the thief snatching your bike." Feeling a bit relieved that there may be footage of this porch pirate grabbing my bike, I go home and he comes and gives me the footage a bit later. In my desperation, I post on Facebook a reward for anything that gets my 2 wheels of fun back to me, knowing my local Arkansas Police Department. I would never see the thing again. I go to bed feeling sick about the whole situation. I crawl into work the next day and FB Messenger pings my phone to life with a new message. Lo and behold, a guy gets a hold of me and sends me pics of the guy trying to trade my bike for his. He turned him down. We talked for a minute and I thanked him for the info. A few minutes later, a brilliant idea pops into my head. Cue sneak mode. I message the FB guy back and ask if he would be willing to work with me on setting up a time for his friend that was wanting a cheap bike to buy said bike from the thief. Guy says, "Sure, I'm down with that." They go back and forth and the thief agrees to a meet and greet with the guy's friend Adam. Thief isn't the smartest cookie in the bunch and sends me the wrong text app number, and I never hear from him. No text or call, nothing. About 6 hours passed and I messaged the guy back and told him the thief never responded. Guy messages the thief back and says that Adam messaged you and he said you never said anything. Thief asks for Adam's number and he calls. I pick up the phone calmly, but I know I'll end up breaking down quickly with rage if I don't get in and out. Thief says he has had it for about 2 months, so I agreed to buy the bike and meet in a big public place at 12 the next day. Feeling like I'm actually gonna nail him, I call and tell my boss what was going on and get the day off for the next day. Next day rolls around. I call my dad to borrow his truck so I can meet the guy in a vehicle he has never seen, considering he looked at my truck and my wife's car. I make it to town and call the local police and ask them to send a cruiser and tell them the situation. The cop takes my info and gives me his number and hides behind a building and tells me to text him when he pulls up. The waiting game starts and I'm nervous, feeling like I could have spooked him at any time during our interaction on the phone. I wait for an hour at the parking lot and the cop says he can't stay there any longer. I message the cop and tell him thank you for your time. I have my wife message some of her old friends from back in the day to see if they can get a bead on him. She gets a hit from one of her friends saying the thief came to them and asked them to help him sell the bike. Thief had another stolen bike with a pic and showed a shed with some background I recognized. Her friend says he may have the bike stashed at the thief's dad's house, and I drive back to my hometown. I proceed to skim my hometown in the sketchier part of town, but come up with nothing. I'm at the point of giving up, but decided to push for anything. I pull up the thief's FB profile, has about 3, and manage to find out who his dad is, and I even find that he uses FB Messenger. I don't want his dad tipping off the thief, but I'm out of options. So I relent and call the thief's father on FB Messenger, and he picks up. I tell him everything, and he is super nice. I tell him I'm not mad or spiteful to you, but I just want my property back from his son. He agrees and apologizes profusely. He tells me he will call him and tells him to give it up. I didn't believe for a second a thief would do that. I go home and wait. About an hour later, I received a message from the thief's dad asking me for my number for his son to call me. About 5 minutes later, I received a call from the thief. I was in utter disbelief. He gives me a sob story, to which I just keep saying, "Okay, where is my bike?" He sent me a text of the address of where he left the bike. I pack back up and head back to town and call the town's PD again, and they have 2 cruisers meet me and escort me to the location. When I say I'm nervous in this part of town, that is an understatement. We get the bike and my wife tells me she physically sees my stress leave my body. We load the bike up and head back home. But the story isn't finished. This whole time I had been keeping my hometown PD informed on everything. Chief calls me and asks, "Do you want to press charges?" My suggestion is don't let him have any slack. Yes, I do. I head to the PD and sign an affidavit against the thief for theft by receiving and criminal mischief. I have messages which the FB guy screenshot of him trying to trade sell the bike. I sign the papers and get home to do damage control. Thief ripped apart the ignition to get it started and took a screwdriver to the gas cap. Mad but happy the bike is back with me. I lock the bike up and order new parts and forget about him. About a week later, I get the urge to check local records and see if they have picked him up. I find out that they indeed caught him, and boy did they add a felony to his rap sheet. I also burst into laughter seeing his mug shot. Well deserved if you ask me. Story 5. Backstory. I joined the Army right out of high school. During basic training, I volunteered for a unit within the Army known as the Old Guard. The Old Guard is responsible for ceremonies in the D.C. area and funerals in Arlington National Cemetery, amongst other duties. The Old Guard consists of units you may have heard of, such as the U.S. Army Drill Team and the Sentinels of the Tomb of the Unknowns, as well as lesser-known platoons, such as the Presidential Guns Salute Battery and the U.S. Army Continental Color Guard, and is the oldest active unit in the Army. Point is, it's a fairly big deal in the Army and in the D.C. area in general. Story time. It's the 4th of July in D.C. Big celebration, all kinds of stuff going on. I'm sure you can picture it. Most of the celebration goes on in front of the Capitol on the National Mall. As part of the festivities, my unit, the Presidential Guns Salute Battery, fires the bass line for the performance of the 1812 Overture. 3-inch anti-tank guns firing blanks. Only the more seasoned guys in the platoon get picked to do it, so the rest of us are given a cordoned-off area in the very front. We bring some food, some chairs, our families, and we have a cookout during the day and watch the show when it starts. During the earlier parts of the day, it isn't too crowded, but as evening draws near, it becomes packed in nearly shoulder to shoulder. Fortunately, as I mentioned before, we had our own area at the front roped off from the general public, giving us ample room to have our cookout. Perk of working for the government. Throughout the day, we would have people politely ask if they could join us. We said no, but were always respectful. We weren't in uniform, but we had our unit t-shirts on, so we were still representing the Army. Enter Karen. It's midway through the afternoon, still a few hours before the show. We're enjoying the weather and the time off. I happened to be near the edge of our area when I heard someone behind me. I turn around, and there she is, a pinched face and a haircut that says, "I want to speak with your manager's manager." Karen. Excuse me, young man. Could you ask your father to take this rope down? This is supposed to be a public area for everyone, and my kids can't see the Capitol. Mind you, there are signs hanging on the rope every 5 feet explaining the purpose of the rope. Me, with my best public relations smile, I'm sorry, ma'am, this area is reserved for members of the Old Guard and their families. If you'd like to come back a little closer to dusk, we'll be taking the rope down around then. The Old Guard? I've never heard of that before. Always happy to drop knowledge, I reply. Ma'am, the Old Guard is the primary ceremonial unit for the U.S. Army and escorts to the President of the United States of America. I don't see the President. Shouldn't you be escorting him or something then? She rolls her eyes. Ooh. I had no idea how to respond to that. Fortunately, I was saved. The platoon sergeant places a hand on my shoulder and says, "Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm Sergeant First Class X. What seems to be the problem?" As I knew this was my cue to get out, I went back to my chair and observed their interaction. Couldn't hear anything, but the interaction concluded with Karen walking away looking annoyed. Didn't think anything else of it until about 2 hours later. We're cleaning up our trash, breaking down the chairs and tables and such. Out of the corner of my eye, I see Karen approaching again, this time with 2 Capitol Police officers in tow. Platoon sergeant must have noticed too. I heard him mutter, "What the duck," under his breath as he walked to intercept the trio. I didn't hear all of the conversation, but we all heard about it later. Platoon sergeant, officers, what seems to be the problem? Cops, obviously exasperated by the situation, say, "Sergeant X, we received a report that your soldiers were making lewd gestures and comments towards this woman's family. Is there any truth to this?" The sergeant laughs. "Absolutely not. I've been supervising them all day. Nothing even close to that has happened today." Nodding as though this was what they expected, the cops say, "We had assumed that, but we had to follow up. Sorry to bother you." Karen, you mean you're going to just let them sit there and hog up all of the space? I drove my kids 9 hours to see this. Ma'am, These men are here with the express permission of the Capitol Police and the District of Columbia. There are signs there, points to a sign not 3 feet away, that explicitly state that. Sergeant, trying to defuse the situation, says, "Ma'am, we're cleaning up our area right now. As soon as we are done, we will be removing the rope to let everyone in. If you can be patient and wait, we can get you and your family right up front here in about 20 minutes." Karen proceeded to stare at them, much like a cow stares at an incoming train. Then she spun around and walked away without another word. "We think it's all over. We go back to what we were doing. We were wrong. We're just finishing up, taking the ropes off of the pylons and stacking the pylons in the arms of another dude in the platoon." Out of nowhere, here comes Karen, trailed by her 4 children, an obviously stressed spouse. I'm assuming her spouse, he could have been boyfriend or baby daddy. "It's about time. Get out of my way," Karen all but screams as she goes barreling right through Private Another Guy. Gotta pause here for a second. To be in the old guard, you have to be between 5'10", 178 centimeters, and 6'4", 193 centimeters, and maintain the Army standard of physical fitness. To add to that, the old guard is an infantry unit. If you aren't aware, infantry are generally the front-line soldiers in combat, and we are trained for just that. So, suffice to say, none of us were small nor weak. Karen was probably around 180-ish. So when I say she barreled through this dude, I mean it. She put some force into it. Private Another Guy goes sprawling to the ground. Steel pylons fly in every direction. A couple hit him in the face, chipped a tooth, and split his eyebrow open. One pylon bounces off the ground and hits one of Karen's Kisa in the leg. The kid, probably 12 or 13, starts wailing like he lost a limb. As we are helping Private Another Guy to his feet, Karen is losing every last ounce of her patience. Red-faced, screaming about how she's going to sue us for assault, how we probably aren't even real soldiers, how we've ruined her family vacation, blah blah blah. At this point, Platoon Sergeant is done with her. If Karen thought she was being loud, she quickly learned there are few things louder than a pissed-off senior non-commissioned officer. With a single word, he quieted everyone within 50 feet of us. "Platoon Sergeant, stop," paused for dramatic effect. "That is enough. You have been harassing me and my soldiers all afternoon. We have tried to be nice, we have tried to be respectful. You have been nothing but rude. Now you've injured one of my soldiers. This stops now." I think Karen might have had a small stroke right then. She stood, mouth agape, not able to utter a single word. And then, as if right on cue, here come those 2 Capitol policemen. They hadn't been far away, and had seen the entire incident. I didn't think Karen's eyes could get any wider, until the first officer pulled out a pair of cuffs and said, "Ma'am, turn around and put your hands behind your back. You are under arrest for assault and harassment." She tried every excuse she could think of, but the cops were having exactly none of her nonsense. They talked to Private Another Guy. He wanted to press charges, so they carted her off. I don't know what the father did with the kids. They disappeared when the cops took Karen. Come to find out, after Private Another Guy comes back from the court hearing, Karen had been carrying 3 bottles of pills that weren't hers, and 2 stolen credit cards when the cops searched her. No idea what kind of time she got, but it wasn't enough. After all was said and done, we watched the 1812 Overture and laughed about Karen for weeks afterward. Private Another Guy was fine, a chipped tooth and a little bit of bruising. Nothing major, fortunately. Story 6. This one might be petty and definitely not as epic as some of the posts I've seen here, and I'm long-winded. Relevant background info first. Anyway, several years ago, I was working at one of the big hardware stores in my area. It's a household name and had some upward mobility with decent pay for the area. I never really found a niche there after my first year and a half. I learned quickly though, so they kinda made me a Swiss Army employee. I could work hardware, plumbing, mix paint, make keys, prepare contracts for installs, and knew all the features and flaws of the appliance models we sold. I was happy to do this because I was building a reputation as someone who could do everything. 2 years in, a new program was implemented that I was uniquely qualified to assist with. They created a new position for me. It was marketed as an all-in-one renovation remodel service for interiors. I was to assist the designer with product selection, product information, contracts, and local marketing for this service. Everyone involved was super excited about it. Note, I was still only making $10 an hour in 2015 for this. The problem was that because this was brand new, no one knew how it should work. The designer basically had to figure it out for herself, while I tried to catch her up with all of the store and product knowledge I had accumulated during my unique experience with the company. Issues with the program. It was actually too expensive. Product to be used had to come from one of our stores, which was limiting. No one knew about it. It was a rocky start. Coworkers would call me over to talk to customers if they mentioned working on a big project, but that's all we had. No completed jobs to reference or anything provided by corporate to get us running. We made our own stuff. I put together a video advertising the service and got the nod from management to use company card to purchase a TV and media player to roll the video on repeat. We built vignettes in the store to showcase our design ability. I had been picking up a lot from the designer, so it ended up being a partnership in effect. The micromanager. Enter Devin, the assistant manager. He had actually been involved in the project from the beginning and had been pretty supportive and brought good energy at first. But I think he got fed up with issues that we couldn't control: sloppy contractors refusing to fix things that they messed up, slow design process as customers worked out what they wanted, and people just backing out after taking a bunch of our time when they see the price. We were, on average, charging $3K more for a small bathroom remodel on labor alone. Consulting and design fees were also worked into the final cost. The product was discounted to basically being tax-free, but as I mentioned, options were limited to products the company sold. It was just too expensive to make many sales on the poor side of town, where almost everyone knows some kind of contractor or tradesman with connections. It wasn't a good market for this program, but we did manage to start hitting and exceeding our numbers. #7 in the region for the brand new program was not bad, and just when we finally started getting some business and a rhythm around 8 months in, Devin decided that it was not working fast enough for him. Obviously, the designer was to blame since he had no authority over the contractors or setting prices. She didn't know what she was doing, and he was going to make some changes. He honestly didn't do much besides hover, bring bad energy, and make terrible suggestions. He didn't understand the scope of what we had to do to get a customer out the door and happy. He forced us to cut corners and get the sale as quickly as possible without concern for liability for basically destroying a room in someone's home to remake it, or what was realistic in terms of timelines. Customers felt rushed and got nervous. They backed out. We came to a standstill. We would only have 2 or 3 designs in progress at a time. But suddenly, after working our asses off building the program, we had no customers for the first time in 6 months. Obviously, Devin was not subjecting us to his authority hard enough, so he went harder and fired the designer. I lost my patience. Justice or injustice, I'm a chill dude, but I had been working my ass off for this company, making peanuts on the promise that I was working towards something. I endured working for the incompetent managers that got their positions because they started working there at 18 and made it their life. The toxic alpha male, "I will lead, you will follow" BS was too much. So I started bullying him back, making fun of him in a teasing way where he couldn't really react without looking bad or losing control. I did that for a while, and he left me alone to run the program in the interim since I was the only option. The designer and I had become friends though, so I was still mad about how it went down. I wasn't finished yet, but I didn't know what to do. Eventually, they got another designer and Devin had me moved back to what I had been doing before. Passed over for several promotions that I was more than qualified for. The market had been flooded with long-time employees that were being moved around. Bad luck, but I was done with the place. One day we were sent an email link to an anonymous manager review survey. The store computers were set up with an always-on and logged-in user profile, so I wrote down the link and verified with a coworker that they weren't unique. In every department I visited that day, I wrote a review for Devon. All different rating, some good, some bad, but I made the good ones so that they sounded bad. But as if I didn't know it was bad. I did that maybe 10 times. It wasn't character assassination or anything, just opinion-based stuff with some vague examples, so no one could figure out it was me. I didn't lie either, I just said what people don't usually say out loud. He would barely look at anyone after that. A couple of weeks later, he resigned his position as assistant manager and took an exterior design position at the other end of the store, as far away from the departments he had been over before. Basically the same thing as what we had done with interiors, but he was in the designer's shoes. I left a couple of months later to work tech support for DHS, but while I was still in training for that, my friends from the store told me he had gotten fired. Maybe he learned something. He should at least have learned how my designer friend felt. They were both fired at Christmas.